Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Goal Management Best Practices for Nonprofits, featuring Kyle Martin, Client Success Manager at Cornerstone OnDemand. We are excited to announce that today's presentation will also include a special case study courtesy of Citizen Schools, an organization which helps to level the playing field for students who grew up in low-income households by extending and enriching the school day with hands-on projects and citizen mentors. We are joined by Lauren Kunze, their HR and Finance Operations Specialist, for discussion on how Citizen Schools has implemented more effective goal management within their organization. The Cornerstone OnDemand Foundation is excited to sponsor this presentation, and we thank you for attending. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To reduce background noise, all lines have been muted. Please note there's a chat box located in the middle right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time through this chat box, as we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's session and the associated slides will be posted on the Cornerstone OnDemand Foundation website within 48 hours. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to these archives and the information about the next webinar in this series. Please feel free to share this presentation with your coworkers and friends. Now, before I hand it over to our presenter, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce myself and the Cornerstone OnDemand Foundation as the host of this presentation. My name is Justin Waddell, and I work within the Nonprofit Empowerment Program of the Foundation, which was launched in 2009 as an effort to provide learning and talent management technology and pro bono HR consulting services to the nonprofit sector, both domestically and abroad. Today's webinar, Goal Management Best Practices for Nonprofits, is part of the Nonprofit webinar series designed to provide expertise and best practices related to human capital for nonprofit leaders. This webinar series is an extension of the HR Pro Bono Corps, a CSOD Foundation initiative which provides HR-related coaching and consulting to nonprofit organizations at no cost. The HR Pro Bono Corps focuses its support in three areas: performance management, learning management, and succession management. If you are interested in learning more about how your organization can benefit from the services provided through the HR Pro Bono Corps, please visit our website at cornerstoneondemand.org. And now, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Kyle Martin. Kyle, thank you again for sharing your expertise today. I'll now pass it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Justin, and good morning, probably good afternoon to several of you as well. I appreciate the opportunity to talk through goal management with everyone. I'll start with a little bit about myself, where I am currently in my history. Currently, as Justin mentioned, I'm a Client Success Manager here at Cornerstone OnDemand. I've been in the HR and talent management industry for about 10 years or so, various capacities from learning, performance, talent acquisition, and organizational development as well. And even though based here in Boulder, Colorado, from Texas originally, and got my degree out of Texas Tech University. So that's a little bit about me. Moving forward, I'll talk a little bit about this presentation and some of the learning objectives that we hope to hit on as we talk through these next few slides. We'll really define goals as a whole, starting off, and then move into the goal management process, the ins and outs of everything there is around the process of goal management, and then talk about some goal management best practices that we've encountered through the industry and various organizations that really help nonprofits align their employees' day-to-day work with business objectives. So just to review kind of the details about what we'll discuss, we'll cover a few topics that help define goals and drive the goal management process. These topics include goals. What are they and what aren't they? Sometimes just as important. SMART goals. You may have heard about this acronym for goals, but we'll dive into what it typically stands for and the meaning behind it. Goal planning, focusing on alignment specifically. Goal reporting as well. Communication and change management. And then we'll finish with reviewing a few best practices that can apply to all organizations. So before diving into goal management, let's start at the top level and truly overview performance management as a whole. And what I mean by that is performance management truly aligns an employee's day-to-day work with business objectives. That's the goal behind performance management. It provides visibility into performance expectations as well, really helps establish accountability within the organization, documents employee performance to feed compensation and career development, for example, highlights skill development and learning needed to progress within the organization, and helps with legal purposes to manage risk as well. Staying at the bigger picture, we can really take a look at and understand how goal management plays a role in the performance management framework of a workforce. Performance management is at the core of aligning a workforce and the culture of that workforce with the overall business strategy and subsequent talent strategy of the organization. The performance management strategy focuses on a few key areas: competencies, goal management, development plans, performance reviews, and rewards. And as you can see, goal management is a critical piece of the pie as it relates to ensuring an organization is able to execute on its talent strategy and drive the outcomes that are desired. Here's a quick glance at a typical performance management calendar. You can see it really starts with setting expectations, executing on those expectations, assessing the execution, rewarding the execution of those expectations, and having a continuous performance calibration throughout the entire cycle as well. At a high level, setting expectations and executing on those expectations is all about goal management. Over the next few slides, we'll dive into those areas further. So let's talk about the definition of goal management. Goal management is the process of creating and aligning individual performance goals to the organization's mission and strategic objectives. These goals help managers evaluate what an employee achieved, and one of the most important pieces of goals that is sometimes overlooked is that effective goal management truly ensures employees understand how their work contributes to the success of the organization. When thinking about engagement and mission focus in an organization, I truly believe this understanding is key to success in the nonprofit environment and for any organization for that matter. So let's define goals. The goal is the result or achievement toward which effort is directed. And why are they important? Simply stated, they can focus employees. Managers cannot always drive motivation or keep track of an employee's work on a continuous basis. Goals are therefore an important tool for managers, since goals have the ability to function as a self-regulatory mechanism that gives an employee a certain amount of guidance. This is also important for reducing redundancy across key initiatives and aligning teams of departments as well. Sometimes just as important as what a goal is, let's consider what a goal is not. So goals aren't necessarily things that are already expected as part of the job. Meeting certain job metrics are usually a job requirement. If you think about it, not meeting those metrics would imply the employee is not meeting the expectations of the job, not necessarily a missed goal. So goals aren't necessarily things that are easily attained either. For example, it's important to answer all emails in an office setting in a timely manner, but is that a goal or is that a job requirement? Typically, goals are not qualitative in nature. While qualitative goals can be relevant depending on the organization, it's important to allow goals to be easily measured when possible, and we'll discuss that further on as well. So remember, there can be a difference between goals and performance. So the question is goal management different for nonprofits? I'd say the same basic structure and purpose is relevant, but there are a few key unique areas to stress. Alignment to strategy and objectives of the nonprofit is truly mission critical. It's what it's all about. Ensuring the workforce truly understands the mission of the organization and drives towards that mission is very important. In addition, as most of you know, funding is a key component that keeps the organization moving forward. Being able to provide current and future donors or sponsors with tangible examples of what the organization is working on and how it is aligned with the mission can be very helpful. Also, for nonprofit organizations that are understaffed, driving focus through goals helps people work more effectively and spend their time on what counts the most for the organization. So now that we've talked through goal management as a process and what goals are specifically, let's talk about creating goals.
Make sure we know how to get the sound and everything all.
We're getting a little bit of feedback. If you could please keep your line on mute, that would be appreciated. Many of you have already heard the term SMART goals probably. Many organizations can and do occasionally use different verbiage with this acronym, but the message and intent is typically the same or similar. So in creating goals, be mindful of goal titles, descriptions, targets, dates, etc. And following this SMART goals philosophy will help ensure the goal is appropriate. SMART goals are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. Therefore, SMART goals. We'll talk through each of these. So first one being specific. The first term stresses the need for a specific goal over and against a more general one. To make goals more specific, they must tell a team exactly what is expected, what is important, why it is important, who's involved, where it is going to happen, and what attributes are important. Typically, it usually answers the 5 W questions. What do I want to accomplish? Why? Specific reasons, purpose, and benefits of accomplishing a goal. Who is involved? Where? The location, for example. And which? Requirements and constraints that apply to the goal. The second term stresses the need for concrete criteria for measuring toward the attainment of a goal. A measurable goal will usually answer questions such as how much or how many. How will I know when it is accomplished? The third term being actionable. Documenting an action plan with the steps needed to achieve the goal is important. The goal should describe what is to be done to reach the goal using action verbs that indicate the result. Realistic is the fourth term and stresses the importance of goals that are realistic and attainable. While an attainable goal may stretch a team in order to achieve it, the goal is not extreme. They are a stretch and a challenge that reaches beyond what's achieved, but is not extreme. Think practical, achievable, and possible. Time-bound, being the fifth term, stresses the importance of grounding goals within a time frame, giving a target date. A commitment to a deadline helps the team focus their efforts on completion of the goal on or before the due date. The time-bound goal would usually answer the question, when? What can I do 6 months from now? What can I do 6 weeks from now? Or what can I do today? Again, while creating goals, think specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. A few examples of relevant goals within a nonprofit organization might be helpful. So for example, a leader of your development function or area potentially could have a goal that would read increase individual contributions by 10% by the end of Q3. So you see we've got the action verb to increase, we've got the what and specific individual contributions, 10% being the measurable, and it's time-bound by the end of Q3. If we have a volunteer manager, for example, action-based words in your goals don't always have to be increase or decrease. For example, they could have a goal specific to maintaining an active roster of 200 volunteers throughout 2013. Similar with someone running or associated with your programs, could be specific to financial goals. So decrease program expenses by 5% by the end of Q2. Again, actionable, specific, time-bound, measurable, realistic. So as we move forward, goal planning is one of the most important management functions for your leadership team. Some things to consider when planning. Alignment. Is the goal aligned or related to other goals? For example, team goals, company goals, board strategic goals, etc. If so, does the employee understand why? If the goal is more personal in nature, is it relevant to the organization? Related, push versus pull. Be cautious when assigning goals. Does the assignment support goal ownership? Employees may have a difficult time buying into the goal if excessive goals are burdensome or if they aren't relevant to the employee. So people perform better when they are committed to achieve certain goals. And goals commitment is important and can truly depend on 3 things. The importance of the expected outcomes of goal attainment, one's belief that he or she is able to achieve the goals, and commitment to others. Promises or engagements to others can strongly improve the commitment. A common best practice is to allow employees to align or pull with higher level goals instead of cascading or pushing goals down towards the employee level. Measures of success, equally important as it relates to goal planning. Choose wisely. Too many or overly complex measurements can get in the way if they're difficult for the manager to manage or too difficult for the employee to understand. Including clearer measures, quality, quantity, cost, frequency of completion, for example, so both parties can track progress and readjust priorities if necessary to ensure performance outcomes can be achieved. So goal reporting shouldn't be a replacement for manager and employee conversations. I do believe that's one of the most important aspects of goals. The same is true for goals that are the same every year simply because that's what has always been done. It's okay to ask why the goal is important and if there's a different way to solve the gap of knowledge flowing through the organization. Related to goal reporting, goals should be assessed regularly, not just at the end of the year prior to a performance review. The question would be, who is responsible for the goal progress, the manager or the employee? Goal conversations should be more than just checking the boxes, and the manager should be asking, what does the employee need, and does the goal need to be adjusted? So what happens if you roll out goal management and nothing happened? Many organizations try to implement the goal process, but it didn't add value. And why was this? Some questions to ask if the process didn't work as hoped are, were employees held accountable for missed goals? Were managers held accountable? How were the goals presented and communicated to employees? Was there ownership and buy-in from the employee or manager? And was the process reviewed and changed after the failed attempt? Remember that you will always have employees that you'll hear from, and you'll have employees that you don't hear from. Ensuring there is focus on what is being done to address those employees in the middle is equally important. So before passing it over to Lauren, I'll hit a couple of the top best practices that we've seen across the industry. Number one, driving goal ownership. Having employees originate their goals, even if it's from a goal library, a set of goals already designed by a leadership team. Number two, understanding goal focus, using perspective or organizational priorities to align with that mission. Think 2 to 3 year strategic priorities, for example. Ease of use. Focus on solid, smart goal statements. Number four, making use of many communication methods. Communicating often, but not always over email is important. Developing managers to manage. So if you do have to be the HR or goal police, focusing on the managers, there's less of them, right? So enabling them to understand the goal process, take ownership, and push communication around goals. Create focus. Contrary to popular beliefs, goals don't have to span the entire year. You can really use start and end dates throughout the year as well across multiple years based on projects. And then finally, I mentioned a bit earlier around communication, emails don't solve goal management problems. If people don't manage their goals all year long, evaluate the check-in process. The most important piece of goal management process is the conversation between the manager and the employees. I'll now pass it over to Lauren, and she'll talk to you about her goal management process at Citizen Schools.
Hi, thank you, Kyle. As mentioned before, my name is Lauren Kunze, and I'm the HR and Finance Operations Specialist at Citizen Schools. And a large part of the work I do on a day-to-day basis has to do with our performance management process, which includes both our 360 reviews as well as goal setting. So today I'm really excited to share with you some of the work we've been doing around goal setting this past year. This is something that's extremely important to our organization, and as it's become a priority over the last 2 years, we've really begun to dive into creating a more comprehensive goal-setting process. So we started to look at how we can re-energize the process for all of our teams and all of our staff members. So we started doing that last year around this time. And we made this a priority for all of our staff members. So last year we set goals just as our annual review was coming to a close. And the process basically worked where all staff worked with their managers to write goals for FY13. And then they had those approved and then entered them in Cornerstone. So we wanted to push working directly with managers to create those SMART goals and then getting them in a place where they were easily visible, easily accessible, and easy to track. And we also incorporated goal setting into our onboarding plans. That way all of our new staff could set goals within their first 60 days. So that's what we did last year. And while that was relatively successful, we really felt like there was more we could do to align goals. We felt that we didn't have as many of the goals that Kyle called mission critical. So my manager, Kate Rogers, who is our Chief Financial and Administrative Officer, this is something that's very important to her, and she spearheads both our goal setting process as well as our annual planning process. She saw an opportunity for us to adjust our timeline and really dig into the process a little bit more by incorporating goal setting into our annual planning process. So grounding the planning and the budgeting that people do earlier in the year in intended outcomes and goals. So what we did this past year in February and March, we had our leadership team begin drafting their department and regional goals. This included a lot of team sharing and reviewing and editing before all those final versions were submitted. So they worked closely as a cohort to really develop their goals and make sure they were using each other as resources at the leadership team level. And from there, they then shared their regional and department goals with the members of their teams. So that way the goal setting process then launched for the entire organization in about April and May. So that way staff could work to make sure that their individual goals were not only SMART, but also aligned and supported department goals that already existed, that were already there for them to go back and reference, which I found to be very, very helpful. So this year, just the big focus was on creating those clear connections between our strategy work, our goals, and our annual plans to develop a better alignment between our regions, our national office, our staff, and their managers. And this is definitely a heavy manager-driven process. Managers are aware of their department goals, they help craft their department goals, and then they help their staff creating their goals. So for us, performance management is definitely an area of continuous improvement. So while we've kind of shifted the timeline and improved alignment this year, we know there's a lot we want to do to improve our departmental and regional alignment and bring other areas into alignment, like our balanced scorecard, into the goal setting process. So for citizen schools, our goal management really focuses on three main areas: the development, alignment, and tracking. And the process I just described really encompasses those first two areas, the focus on alignment and development. We wanted to make sure our goals were SMART, and we use a little bit of a different acronym. We use strategic, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-bound, but it's basically the same concept that Kyle described. And we wanted staff to think about the goals that they were creating to really be able to come up with more outcome-oriented goals rather than activity-oriented. And then the focus on goal alignment, which I just described, between our departments and our priorities. And then goal tracking is the third big area. So what we had hoped to do is use some of the management forums that we already have being used to help the goal setting process, to help check in, track, and show progress towards goals. So we have our staff set milestones for their goals once they've been created. And then throughout the year, managers have one-on-ones with their staff member every week. And that kind of helps to make sure staff are on the same basis with their managers. And it's a good time to check in on week-to-week progress. But the big goal check-in is our 6-week step back. Every 6 weeks, we recommend that managers have an extended meeting with each of their staff members to kind of check in on those goals and see whether or not our staff are on track for reaching their goals. And then during the performance reviews, we of course track progress at the mid-year and track completion at the end of year. So I also just wanted to highlight briefly some of the supports we provide as we manage the goal setting process. We definitely know that this isn't always the easiest thing for staff to do. As someone told me during the spring, they said, oh, you know, and this is just a tough mind exercise. And it is. I mean, it's really hard sometimes to break away from the day-to-day work when you have, especially in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things fighting for your attention. it's hard to break away from the immediate and consider where you want to be in a year. What are your own individual goals, and how are those goals connected to your department? So it can be kind of hard. So we wanted to provide our staff with a couple of tools. One is the SMART Goal one-pager. So basically that breaks down between what makes a SMART goal, and kind of we took an example goal and walked through what that looks like. We also shared with staff our business scorecard estimates, so what the organizational priorities are, what are our different perspectives, our targets, so that at a higher level you could see where your goals were kind of connected to. So in HR, a lot of mine are internal operations and talent-based, 2 of our 5 perspectives. And right after that goal-setting period, we also provided a goal milestone template. So you could break down the goal and kind of see where you need to be to help track the progress. And then we also provided additional resources to each of our cohorts who might have similar goals, who might be thinking about goals in the same way. We did a few goal presentations similar to the content of this one about what is a SMART goal, what you need to be thinking about as you create your goals, and then just additional resources as far as connecting people to review and give feedback on an individual basis. So definitely a lot of improvements this past year, but we know that there are still a lot of areas where we need to improve, especially when it comes to that alignment. So we hope to, as we wrap up the goal setting for this year, that will be something that will really help all of our staff as they move into tracking and checking progress throughout the year. Yeah. I'll pass it back over to you, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. Congrats on everything that you've done there, and I appreciate you sharing it. Moving forward, so you've heard a little bit about best practices and the general goal management process, and then obviously some of the successes that Lauren and her team have had there. Kind of, what's next? What's your next move? A suggestion would really be to discuss this goal management process with your leadership team. Talk about how important it is for the leadership team and the managers to be involved heavily from the beginning, to really own the process moving forward. Secondly, starting simple is always a great suggestion, and so goals do need to be specific and measurable and have target dates, but making sure you're not getting too cumbersome in terms of process and over-exhaustive goals where you're not setting yourself up for success. Thirdly, evaluating your outcomes. Maybe you've talked through the process, you've developed a strategy, you started simple with a few goals, and now let's look back, let's evaluate how that went, how things could adapt and change moving forward. So this would really be kind of your next move if you're starting from scratch on goal management. Otherwise, maybe you've taken some best practices from the presentation or learned from Lauren on some things that they've done and seen success there and move forward to implement them at your organization. So hopefully this is helpful for everyone on the phone. And Justin, I think now we'll move to Q&A, I believe.
Great. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Lauren. We are now going to begin our Q&A portion of today's webcast. As a reminder, all questions can be submitted through the chat function that is in the right-hand side of your screen. We've already got a couple questions that have been submitted for both Kyle and Lauren. Kyle, we're going to start with you first. Kyle, the first question is, what are some of the pros and cons of alignment versus cascading, in other words, top-down goals? For example, if cascading, what are some of the best practices around that process?
Great, well, thanks, Justin. So earlier we talked about aligning goals up with strategic priorities versus pushing down goals to your employees. For example, having a top-level goal that you actually push down to employees through the organization. I would say best practice that we've seen organizations be most successful with is really allowing those employees to create their own goals from the bottom and align up to those strategic priorities versus cascading, where you start with a strategic priority goal and push that down throughout the organization. Now, related to your best practices, if you do go the cascading route where you have a set of goals in your organization that you would like all employees to participate in, ensuring that those goals are tailored to the employee and the level as you begin pushing them out. And what I mean by that is, if you have a division or a board level goal that is related to reducing expenses in your programs, as you begin to cascade or push that to your employees, specifying and really tailoring that message where it's more around their program, what they can do in their job responsibilities to meet that goal. And so it's not a high-level ambiguous goal. It does not relate to that employee.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lauren, this next question is for you. What is the size and geographic spread of citizen schools, and how many managers do you have?
Great. We have about 80 managers, and we have about 200 staff who participate in our performance management process, the reviews and goal setting. We have an additional 200 who are kind of just our frontline teaching staff, and they have their own system related to instructional learning and instructional teaching. And then we are based in Boston, and we are in 7 regions. So we're in Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, New Jersey, Chicago, Texas, and California.
Great, thank you. My next question is for Kyle. Kyle, if I'm introducing goal management for the first time, should my organization keep it simple by cutting corners on what is required while creating goals?
So, earlier I mentioned kind of next steps and starting simple. And, what I mean by that is less process sometimes can be a good thing. Ensuring that you're not cutting corners on developing SMART goals is equally important. So starting simple with the amount of goals or the process involved can be a good idea, but ensuring those goals still contain measurables, time-bound metrics, that they're specific, and that they're actionable is very important. So not cutting corners on those specific goal creations is very important.
Okay, great, thank you. And this next question, the last that I have right now, is for Kyle. Kyle, how do I convince the leadership team that this process is critical to the success of the organization and not just another HR process?
Yep. So I think this is definitely one of the challenges that any goal process, and Lauren, you can maybe speak to this as well, will encounter, which is a lot of employees, a lot of managers sometimes view this as an HR process. And it's important to understand going into it that it is truly an organizational process and a business process to ensure that their business strategies are executed upon appropriately, and the alignment is there. And ensuring that your managers understand that and buy into that before even beginning on a goal-setting process, utilizing your executive director or your board to push out the communications and messaging is as important as anything that we've discussed today. So I think that is really a key component of moving forward with goal management.
Great, thank you. And if there are no other questions coming in through chat, that will conclude our Q&A. Thank you everyone for participating. As a reminder, today's slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted on the Foundation website within 48 hours. We will also be sending all participants a follow-up email with a link to this location shortly. I want to thank everyone again for your participation and wonderful questions, and a big thank you to Kyle and Lauren especially for a fantastic presentation. And please stay tuned for more information on the next webinar in the HR Pro Bono series on succession planning best practices for nonprofits. This webinar is coming up in September. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.